Thank you. I declare open this hearing of the Public Accounts and Estimates Committee. I ask that mobile telephones please be turned to silent. On behalf of the Parliament, the committee is conducting this inquiry into vaping and tobacco controls. I advise that all evidence taken by the committee is protected by parliamentary privilege. However, any comments repeated outside of this hearing may not be protected by this privilege. Witnesses will be provided with a proof version of the transcript to check, and verified transcripts, presentations and handouts will be placed on the committee's website. I welcome Lee. The names today are really testing me.
Misers.
Okay, thank you. Chief Executive Officer, Jackie Stepanoff, Director, Policy and Regulation, and Mark Bannister, Manager, Waste and Land Policy and Regulation from the Environment Protection Authority. Thank you all so much for coming this afternoon. I invite you to make an opening statement or presentation of no more than 5 minutes, and after which time committee members will just ask you some questions. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. I'd first like to acknowledge Elders past and present of the Wurundjeri people on whose country we gather today, and I pay my respect to how country has been protected and cared for by Aboriginal people for many tens of thousands of years, and their continuing connection and aspirations for country. As Victoria's independent environmental regulator, EPA's role is to protect the environment and human health from the impacts of pollution and waste. And it is important that the environmental impacts due to pollution from and mismanagement of vape and e-cigarette waste are considered when assessing their effects on the community. Today, I'll principally focus on risks posed by batteries inside vapes. Vapes contain lithium-ion batteries, which are combustible and are an ignition source when improperly handled, meaning that they can cause fires when they are not sorted, separated, handled, or stored appropriately. They can cause explosions or fires at waste receivers and potentially injury and even death to workers. Our fire services tell us that they respond to at least one battery-related fire each week in Victoria. These fires present a significant health risk as well as financial costs to waste management facilities, to transportation companies and to communities. Lithium-ion batteries are embedded or are sealed inside vapes, which means that they are difficult to separate at end of life. And this really limits disposal options, as you cannot dispose of them at traditional battery collection points, such as those that you see at supermarkets and other retailers. Instead, consumers must remove the batteries from the devices, which is often easier said than done. Vapes often enter the waste stream undetected, are prone to improper disposal, and are often put in general waste by consumers because they cannot easily find another disposal pathway, are not aware of the risks and consequences, or that they simply don't know that their vapes contain a battery that is banned from general waste. The environment protection legislation in Victoria protects human health and the environment from the harmful effects of lithium-ion batteries once they become waste. The centrepiece of that legislation is the General Environmental Duty, or the GED, that means a person or a business accepting e-waste, so waste batteries of any type for collection, storage, handling, transport or reprocessing must take all reasonably practicable actions to reduce risks to human health and the environment. However, while the GED applies to all Victorians, our legislation largely directs sanctions and enforcement to businesses. So this means when we are dealing with consumers or community members, EPA focuses our regulatory efforts on education and communication. Vape waste is also controlled by Victoria's Environment Protection waste regulations, which set separation, storage and handling requirements for e-waste and batteries. And finally, vape waste is managed through our permissions framework. So waste transporters, waste receivers and processors that collect vapes require an EPA permission, such as a licence or a permit and permission holders need to put in place fire risk controls and a monitoring program. However, all of these regulatory provisions become less effective when businesses, including transporters and recyclers, are unaware that lithium-ion batteries are in the waste that they are receiving and they are storing. So if hidden inside vapes, they pose a risk that can be very difficult to control, even for businesses that are trying to do the right thing. Before I speak directly to actions EPA is taking to address risks from vapes, I want to give a short overview of our fire prevention program. So EPA conducted 350 inspections at recycling facilities between March 2023 and February 2024, issuing 17 infringement notices, 109 remedial notices, 3 official warnings, and more than 475 pieces of compliance advice. So while battery fires continue to be a challenge, EPA is pleased that our fire prevention program has avoided a number of significant fires. EPA is also coordinating its efforts and is collaborating with other regulators and agencies, both within Victoria and nationally, to address the growing issue of vape waste. EPA has issued fines for vapes that have been littered, and we've increased our public education to raise awareness about how and where to dispose of e-waste, including used batteries. EPA is also leading the development of the first national guidelines to assist industry and local councils on the management of end-of-life lithium-ion batteries. And this will provide a powerful national standard for businesses and will enable cross-jurisdictional approach to ensure good practices are shared amongst all operators. This slide really demonstrates that there is a lot of work being done across the Victorian environment portfolio to address the risk to the environment and human health from vapes. And while I won't go through all of these now to save a bit of time, I'm happy to go into further detail in your questions if you wish. And finally, I thought I'd just touch on some of the national directions or new directions at the national landscape. So the Australian government has introduced restrictions on the import and sale of vapes, including a ban on sales of vapes outside pharmacies from 1st of July 2024, and obviously the prohibition of sales to minors. This is expected to significantly decrease the numbers of vapes in waste. To respond to consumer concerns, environment ministers have agreed to accelerate work to expand current battery product stewardship schemes, such as B-Cycle, into a national mandatory extended producer scheme that would include embedded batteries like in devices like vapes. And these changes are critical to the effectiveness of these stewardship schemes. However, EPA considers vapes provided by pharmacies will continue to pose risks once they enter the waste stream if consumers cannot easily separate the batteries embedded inside them. For that reason, we think improving manufacturing, import and labelling standards are a critical part of reducing lithium-ion and vape-related waste and fire risks. Vapes should be designed to be easily dismantled, discharged and avoid single use. This type of product safety regulation is often led by the Australian government, and EPA Victoria has advocated for stronger product regulation as part of its participation in national consultation, and we will continue to do so. So thank you, and I'm happy to hand over to any questions.
Thank you very much. Mrs MacArthur.
Oh, Chair, thank you very much. But your proposition of recycling vapes depends on people buying them from a regulated market, correct?
What we're focused on is how they're disposed of. That's exactly right.
Yeah, so, but we're learning that a huge proportion of the vapes that are being used here in Victoria come from the illicit market. So there's no way you can regulate that. You no way you're going to get the recycled products into your, system of recycling, are you?
No, so we're focused at two ends. Firstly is through a product stewardship scheme, vapes.
But that's with legalised providers,
That's
right?
And the other half of it is consumers, and how consumers then dispose of waste vapes, and particularly the batteries inside them. The two are linked, and you're exactly right that illegally produced that don't meet any product standards are always going to create a higher risk. We will focus on both.
Yeah. Well, we learnt from children today that they wouldn't even perhaps put their vapes in a container provided by the school because somebody might see them doing it and they're not meant to be doing it, so they won't do it. So they'll just put it in a rubbish bin wherever they are. But I'm sure people buying illegal vapes don't seem to be interested in the environment.
No, that's right, and that's why tightening up at the front end through product stewardship, as I've said, and obviously other parts of the system looking at illegal vapes, and then we, as the EPA, focusing on consumers and appropriate and legal disposal of waste where it does occur.
But the law enforcement agencies told us they can't even properly dispose of them. There is no system by which they can properly dispose of all the contraband goods that they acquire.
Yeah, there are systems to dispose of battery waste. There is complexity with vapes given the embedded nature of it, absolutely.
Yes, so how do you intend to overcome that?
What we are advocating for, as I was saying, was better product standards so that batteries
but the main products are coming in illegally. Then in China, they're not going to comply with your better product standards, are they?
No, exactly, which is why we say it's really a national issue, and we are supporting the Australian government in how it deals with those things that are imported into the country. Of course, that's not a matter for state governments. We have an advocacy role, absolutely, which we play strongly. We are leading work to manage risks to human health and the environment. But a lot of those levers that you've described don't actually sit within either EPA or in many cases within a state government.
So at the moment we've got vapes going into local government sites of waste disposal, correct?
Correct.
What threat does that pose to the environment?
Fires. As I've said, our fire services are seeing at least one fire caused by batteries. Now, that's not necessarily directly related to vapes, but batteries and embedded batteries in particular are high risk to transporters of that waste, to facilities that are looking to recycle that waste, but also to landfills, council and privately managed.
We've also heard that it's very difficult to pull a vape apart to get all the products out of it, yet there might be some valuable products in there, like the lithium battery or whatever. Where else in the world are they, can you point to that they're able to, recycle or pull it apart and recycle these products?
Yeah, my understanding is that the issues that we're seeing here are global issues, but we do see with other product types where they are created with a view to being able to be properly recycled and when they are end of life. So there are examples in other product classes.
Whereabouts?
Many different product classes. So not vapes, sorry, I'm talking about, but you can construct a vape so that it can be easily dismantled, but it requires product standards up front.
Yeah. So once again, we depend on the legal, regulated market, probably big tobacco, who might well comply with all these standards, but the vast majority of these products are being sold and produced illegally with no standards whatsoever. So you're not going to hit the mark at all, are you?
That's why it's not just, in my view, in our view, not just one set of actions that need to be undertaken. Absolutely, product stewardship and proper standards will make it easier to reduce risks at the end of life. We continue to focus right across the supply chain, though.
But you can't have any oversight over the supply chain when these products are not being produced within a regulated supply chain, are they? They're being produced illegally, offshore, imported illegally, sold illegally, with no standards whatsoever, so they're not interested in some sort of product regulation or standards.
Well, a mandated standard that means that you cannot import those products.
We can't
But I
import
take your
them
point.
now. We can't import them now, but we are. There's truckloads of these things coming in every day. The authorities can maybe find 1 in 10. They're flooding the market.
Yes.
And there's no standards at all attached to them. So you can have all the product standards in the world, but the criminal element of producing or selling here a totally unregulated product that has no standards of production.
Can I chime in?
Yeah.
Thank you for raising the concerns about, as you described, flooding of these devices and illegal devices and the dangerous batteries embedded in them. I think the point that is helpful to raise is that we do have models, including in Victoria, of perhaps at a more modest scale, of where devices with these batteries embedded can be safely recycled and processed. I learned recently that when you talk about product stewardship, which I'd always thought meant the beginning of the chain, it's about the manufacturers, product stewardship also includes providing adequate disposal pathways and better disposal pathways. So it's EPA Victoria's view that any national product stewardship scheme should include better disposal pathways, and including drawing on the examples that we have, again, I agree, modestly provided here in Victoria. So I do think we have a model for how we can safely provide waste vapes into a recycling pathway, whether they're illegally obtained or not. And we hope that that model can be expanded through the national scheme that's been announced.
So you'll be busy encouraging the consumer buying an illegal product to dispose of it legally?
I think the short answer to that is yes, we wouldn't distinguish. I don't think it would be for EPA or any government agency to pick and choose which consumers we educate. Our view is that all consumers need the opportunity to be able to dispose of their waste safely and legally.
Should you run a better advertising program about the environmental effects of these products? And maybe all those people concerned about the environment might reconsider their purchases.
We do quite a number of campaigns around battery waste in particular. We haven't done anything targeted specifically on vapes, but more broadly around battery waste we have, and it is an effective way for us to educate the consumer.
I'll hand over to my colleague.
Thank you, Ms MacArthur. Mr Clare.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much for coming to join us today. Just to start with, what proportion of vapes would you estimate are properly disposed of in Victoria?
It's hard to say because we don't have data on those that are not properly disposed of. At this stage, one of the problems we have, as in fact the other member raised, is the flooding of illegal vapes into our waste supply chain. It's safe to say, though, based on the fire statistics that we have, that it is not enough.
Yeah, and just on that with the fire statistics, can you give an illustration of what we're talking about in the change over the last few years with the fires that we're seeing in the waste management process compared to, say, 5 years ago, or any other time frame that you've got data for?
I've brought data with me for current fires.
Yeah,
I haven't brought
great.
data with me for a time series of fires.
Current data will be fantastic.
So I think as Lee began earlier in his speaking notes, he's noted that we're looking at fire services reporting up to one a week, sometimes
About
up to
one a week,
6.
yeah.
Some weeks are reporting up to 6. I think the Australian Council of Recyclers submission, which was provided to the committee, talked about 1,000 fires in the last year. It's quite extraordinary.
And I know that's covering all batteries and all other reasons for
Yes,
fire,
that's right.
but as far as you can tell, if you can tell, what proportion of those fire incidents would you say are attributable to?
We don't have
Yeah, we don't have that information. I think that is part of the challenge. I mean, the most significant fire that we know that has been confirmed as being caused by e-cigarettes was one in Canberra in 26 December 2022, known because of the impact it had, damage. The rebuilding of the facility that was burnt down was cost over $50 million, and then there was a flow-on impact to waste collection. Now, there's probably many others, but that's one that we've been able to very clearly say was caused by an e-cigarette. Others, it becomes difficult. The nature of these fires and the explosive effect of these fires, actually working out which battery or what the product was that caused it, is very difficult.
And indeed, many of these fires may not be in the waste stage of life as well. So some battery fires are triggered, as you would know, by consumers within their homes. We hear about scooters and those kinds of things. So it can be hard to slice this data, but I guess our perspective is there's no need to slice the data to know that we have a problem.
Yeah, and especially when it does occur in that waste management process, I'd imagine the air pollution outcomes from that would be quite horrendous as well. Is that fair, or is it variable? It's
fair to say that anything leads to pollution, right, Lee? It leads to air pollution. It can have particular impacts on our waterways as well.
Particularly if it's burning anything that could be in rubbish, plastics and all sorts of other things.
That's exactly right,
Yeah, thank you. We're talking a lot today about the regulation of tobacco vendors in particular, and also we've spoken briefly about the role that pharmacies will play with regards to vaping specifically. In terms of the waste process, I guess more for cigarettes, vapes, the whole system, do you believe that industry has a role to play in actually subsidising some of these waste disposal efforts, whether it be for vapes or for cigarettes? Do you think that the people selling these products should be required to, in some way, contribute towards the cost of disposal?
Certainly, I would say manufacturers, absolutely, in terms of both product design, but also, as Jackie was talking about before, having supporting proper disposal pathways, and that goes to retailers too.
Yeah.
We need to be sort of enabling as best we can lawful and proper disposals of these waste products, and that cost should be, in my view, largely borne by the manufacturers and sellers of those products.
And that goes to what you're talking about with stewardship as well, that holistic process. Yeah.
Yes. And the question of where the investment comes from is a key question for those who are designing the stewardship scheme to consider, but it's certainly EPA's view that it would be impossible to do it without industry investment.
Sorry,
Thank you.
just to continue on that. So the manufacturers and the retailers, you're suggesting maybe pick up the bill for the disposal of it.
For the products they make.
For the products they make, but the whole recycling program or the disposal product will be also including illegal products, right? So if there's some, waste...
Which is what the regulations
depositories
seeking to change.
That's
That's why I asked it in that context.
Yeah,
It's
so
not
if there's
just-
some depository for vapes, for example, and it's the cost of that is met by the manufacturers or the retailers, won't they also be therefore bearing the cost of the illegal product?
Yeah, free riders in the system, if you like, and that's where other tools need to be used, as you've identified, to really stamp out those illegal markets. Otherwise, exactly, you'll see a small number of those who want to do the right thing carrying the burden of those that don't.
Hardly fair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Galea. Mr. Puglielli.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. If I have a vape, it's used up, and I want to dispose of it, where would I take it?
So in Victoria, if you have a vape and the battery is embedded in it, and I'll ask my colleague Mark to tell me what the acronym stands for, NT.
Oh, NTCRS, that is, there's various product stewardship schemes that already exist for e-waste. In Victoria, e-waste has been banned from landfill for some years, I think 5 years now or more. And basically we've set up, Sustainability Victoria, Recycling Victoria have set up a network of collection centres where you can take e-waste. But these are generally belong to council transfer stations and other types of facilities.
Okay, and one of those centres would be where I would take the used vape product, even if it's an embedded battery, that's where it would
Many
go.
of the centres have options that have both loose batteries and also embedded devices.
Okay, and how many centres like that are there in Victoria?
This feed says Sustainability Victoria, others say that no one's more than half an hour from a facility in Victoria.
Okay, and that's a consistent standard across the state?
Across the state.
Wow, okay.
Out in the country too?
Yeah, apparently. Is this Sustainability Victoria's message? That, yes. Opportunity for a tour.
Yeah, it sounds like a tour's on the cards.
I want to make a clarification though. SV
Please do,
says that we're half an hour from an e-waste depot.
Yeah, e-waste
Not all
depots,
those e-waste
right.
depots may also accept
Oh, that's
embedded
right,
batteries and devices.
And do we have an overview as to what proportion do accept the
No,
embedded
I don't.
batteries?
I think we'd have to take that on notice.
That would be very much appreciated if
Yeah,
you can.
understood.
And do you think there's a broad amount of public literacy in terms of people knowing where they can take their vape product, embedded battery or no? Do people know where they can take it?
I would hazard, I would say, and this is an opinion, that many people probably wouldn't even realise there is an embedded battery within a vape, which is why we see it disposed of in general waste. So I think to Mr MacArthur's comment before, how we can continue to educate people around batteries, the types of products that have batteries, is going to be critical to whatever the scheme is going forward.
Okay, and is the EPA undertaking that work? Like that's an issue you've identified and you're going to be...
Yes, so we've been doing broad work on batteries, embedded batteries. We're doing work that's Mark is leading nationally on sort of safe disposal, working with councils, working with waste transporters. So there's a lot of work going on to raise that general awareness about proper disposal of these products.
And do you have an overview as to what proportion of vaping products are disposed of the correct way out of the overall product that comes into the state?
No.
Illegal and legal.
No would be the short answer. Getting a sense of the total sort of, we need to know how much is coming into the state overall.
And we don't have access to that either?
No, I think as has been stated by Mr. McCarthy, there's a large illegal.
To get even a vague sense of the proportion, is that something that can be provided on notice or is that beyond the scope?
We're very happy to look into what we can provide you with on notice. If we aren't able to cover off the illegal component of it, we'll let you know. But we're happy to provide you any information we can collect of the proportion of vapes that are disposed lawfully. That's the question.
Yeah, I just imagine it could be a performance measure that would be quite useful
understood.
Just to measure how these campaigns and communications are going. In terms of the idea of the bins at schools that we heard about earlier today, is that something that the EPA would support as a potential approach?
I think the EPA would support expansion of lawful disposal pathways. I think it's really a matter for schools and education as to what they feel comfortable to have on their premises, but as long as the disposal pathways are safe and well supported, I would point out they do need to be safe and well managed and operating within lawful permissions.
Okay.
Can I come back to a question you asked me which I didn't have the answer to?
Sure, go for it.
You were asking about education campaigns. There was a slide we had up earlier and we didn't want to talk too long, so we didn't go into detail. But it does talk about some of those education campaigns. So you're welcome to have a look later. There's one that's really impressive, which is Small Acts, Big Impact, which I know has been important, and EPA, it was done by Sustainability Victoria. EPA has supported that and shared it through our networks as well, but we would encourage more of that kind of education.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the changes to design of the products that you mentioned earlier, in terms of the regulated market, is it your view that any of the products that are sold in the country, they should be detachable so there's not that embedded battery issue that you're seeing?
Yeah.
Is that a standard you'd want to have set, that's...
Yes. So single use is an issue, just creates more waste. But yes, you're exactly right. You need to be able to safely remove the battery so that it can be recycled, and then other parts of the vape itself can be recycled. Is what we would be advocating for.
Okay, and in terms of the overall waste that you're seeing, I mean, we've focused on sort of the e-waste side here, but cigarette butts, I understand you also talked to in your submission. You've identified that there is a significant litter problem contributing to environmental pollution and fire hazards. I understand you have taken efforts to address this in some form. Could you talk about maybe firstly, in terms of proportion here, is that the greater proportion of the waste you're seeing from cigarette butts, or is it the e-waste?
So EPA's role in relation to enforcing litter provisions under the Environment Protection Regulation is really focused on particularly cigarettes and other and cigarette butts from moving vehicles is a large part of where we focus. With general sort of litter enforcement, the responsibility of local government. To give you a sense of scale, in 22-23 financial year, about 60% of all EPA litter fines related to cigarette butts. So it was about 4,600. So it's a significant part of what we do. Now,
Does everybody pay the fine?
that's a different issue, no. We have collections through Fines Victoria.
And what proportion of that figure would come from a total, I imagine, that you've just quoted for the cigarette butts? How about for vape products?
Yeah, we don't particularly
Just would be good to compare, I think.
No, we don't have specific data on vapes. We do cigarette butts because they're classified as dangerous litter, which falls within our remit, because they're lit.
I can add to that, Lee.
Yeah.
We did check our litter records to see if we'd issued fines for litter of vapes. We have issued a small number, like single digits, of fines for littering of vapes out of cars. Just to be clear, EPA's litter regulations are quite narrow. They're focused on litter from moving vehicles and in a couple of other contexts. We don't have the broad litter powers that councils have.
Right.
But just to let you know, there have been a small number of infringements issued where we have seen and had evidence of a vape being thrown out of a car.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Puglielli.
Can I just butt in, Chair? Just clarify that half an hour site, EV disposal site, half an hour from where? You mentioned that an EV,
E-waste.
E-waste disposal site.
I think maybe we'll come
half
back
an
to
hour
you.
from what?
I think we'll come back to you on the details, but we can certainly find the announcement that Sustainability Victoria has on their website and provide.
What do you think it's about? What's it refer to?
Well, it was to do with the e-waste ban that was implemented and making sure that population centres were supported across the state. So to the degree, I can't tell you it's individual houses or population.
You might provide the
centres, but I think
locations
we'll
plus also those locations that accept vapes as well.
Vapes, yeah.
That would be really
We'll
great.
take that on notice.
Provide that on.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, I'd
That
like
would
to
help,
know
Mr.
across
MacArthur.
Victoria where these disposal sites are and if they're half an hour away from anybody.
Ms MacArthur would be really keen to understand where they're close to Geelong and her electorate office, so she can
That's,
make sure they
I
get down there. I might go to my questions now, if that's all right. So embedded.
Harry, I want to know how close it is to the rural towns, Mr Alagari.
Thank you, Ms MacArthur.
Especially everywhere outside the tram tracks in Melbourne would be quite helpful.
We understand your question. You're just wanting to test that sense of availability.
Availability. Very
So,
keen to know where all these sites are.
Okay, Mr Hilakari.
Now that we've got some clarity around around vapes and their sales, is that going to assist with engaging manufacturers to have those non-embedded batteries, and has that discussion started with with other states and the Commonwealth?
Yeah, there's certainly discussions happening at two levels. At the product stewardship level, as I was mentioning before, Environment Ministers has really asked for a more regulated product stewardship scheme in relation to batteries, so that work is underway.
Great.
And then, and Mark, you might want to talk a bit about the work that you are leading, which isn't necessarily about products, but about management of that waste and consistently, again, at a national level.
Yeah, so all states and territories are concerned about, I guess, the growth in lithium-ion batteries in general, not just in vapes, but in all devices. So at the moment, there's very little information. We do have some guidance, but it is very basic on how to store these as a waste and manage batteries as a waste, but we do foresee with the energy transition and the popularity of electric vehicles and so on, it is just going to increase. So we're looking at guidance. Yep.
Could you just speak a little bit to the variety of lithium-ion batteries?
Yeah.
What sort of products and the scope of products they're in presently?
Yeah, so everything from toothbrushes, your headphones, the earbuds and so on, that small, through to phones, larger devices such as, your scooters, and then you're looking up to EVs, then, renewable energy storage devices, so getting up to the big scale. So they've really taken off.
A challenge that we've got to address.
Yeah, it's across the
regardless of the
board.
situation of vapes.
Yeah,
That's right. If you think about, lithium-ion batteries, embedded batteries, and everything from pacemakers through to kids' shoes with those light, they are, getting into all kinds of products and creating real challenges particularly for waste, waste companies or recycling companies. These getting into waste streams where they shouldn't, partly because people just don't know that there are batteries in these products.
And so when we think of the wide scope of all of those lithium-ion batteries and maybe a suggestion that those people who manufacture them should be paying for the recycling of them, it's not actually as narrow as the scope of vapes versus illegal vapes. It's actually a huge industry
That's right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hilakari. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to appear before us this evening. The committee will follow up on any questions taken on notice in writing, and responses will be required within 5 working days of the committee's request. I'd like to thank everyone who's given evidence to the committee today, as well as Hansard, the committee secretariat and parliamentary attendants. I'd also like to thank the hospitality, security and cleaning staff who've looked after all of us here today. I declare this hearing adjourned.